Talk Show. Recorded live.
Welcome to the PipeIQ AI Podcast, where we cover all the topics related to AI business acceleration. We are in the heart of Silicon Valley here in Palo Alto PipeIQ headquarters in Palo Alto, California. This is podcast number 4. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today I have my co-host Rajesh Kadam. Today is Sunday, October 27th, 2024. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Palo Alto. Rajesh, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Eric. Thanks for asking. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's it's a Sunday, so we got our act together. We're live streaming.
Yes.
Hopefully our audio is working properly today. Like
Yeah.
last week, I think we did an hour-long podcast where we were like talking amongst ourselves because
God, yeah.
audio was down, but we re-recorded it, so podcast 3 is out there,
Yeah,
so
right.
it's good. So thanks to all the people that gave us feedback on that, while we were doing the show. So excited to be here because it's just another week in AI, and there's just been, it's just going on and on. Like there's new articles. The Wall Street Journal published an article. We'll talk about that. Talk about all the news that's going on. We'll talk about the services. The show today, we are going to talk about AI service value proposition, right? We talked last week, we introduced the concept of always investigating, AI always investigating. And that comes back to the value prop and, how do you structure any kind of POC or any kind of thing you're using with AI to get value out of it, right? And that's one of the things it's always investigating. The industry has to make that corner. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about AI inbreeding and what does AI inbreeding mean? New term we heard this week. So it's kind of funny, right? But it's also important when you're talking about, service level AI, which is what we're talking about now. So we'll talk a lot about that and what the industry is doing around, services, Salesforce, Workday, call deflection, and what are those value props and how do you realize those as an enterprise? So should be a great show today. But before we do that, let's talk about your week. Did you discover that it was a busy week for you too?
Definitely a super busy week, actually, just between customer demos and keeping up with things and product ideation. And so it's been a super busy week for me. But I think in terms of news, the big one probably was about Claude, Anthropic. They released a new capability with Claude where, via API, that was released only via API, but where it can control your computer or like look at actions on your computer and kind of, go and do that, replicate that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a RPA, robotic process automation kind of functionality, basically, right? Which folks like Automation Anywhere and who's the other player? I forget. They've been doing or attempting to do that for many years now. And LLM being able to do that is totally, yes, that's something to watch out for.
It's a new, what we call an agent or an active agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, now you have a new agent that's going to go and, control your keyboard actions, right? And play keyboard on your computer and let your AI do that, right?
Right.
Which is a little bit scary, but not really scary because, a lot of the bots have been doing this for years, right? And whether somebody's typing at a keyboard or whether you're just creating, content and sending it out, right? I don't know. It's interesting. Now, when you start talking mouse clicks and automation for service programs, right? Then maybe that's interesting. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I believe
Right.
this thing is doing, right? I haven't had a chance to play with it. The thing is, it's only via API right now. So I think it'll be even more interesting if they were able to do it from a front end, right?
Right.
For retail users. That would be kind of pretty cool.
Well,
so we'll see.
My son went to Carnegie Mellon, computer science, AI, and so he comes back and he has libraries that will look at pixel maps, right? And then he's built automation to control everything, right? Games, go harvest a bunch of gold from a given game. He'd go write something that would go do that, and and then build that, right? To all kind of mundane tasks, right? Where something that I'm like, oh, he had a buddy that had a job doing data analytics, right? And his buddy was his favorite gamer, right? So my son goes and builds, using this Pix Maps, builds an AI application for his buddy that his buddy could run because he works from home. So then he could just have the Pix Mapper watch what was actually happening, do mouse clicks and all that, right?
Impressive.
And do my buddy's job. So then his buddy could then go play games with him all day, right? So that he freed up his buddy. And I don't want to get him in trouble, right? Because but but this technology has been out there for a while, but it's very manual. It's not like a in service format.
Right.
You have to have a computer science degree in AI, from Carnegie Mellon, one of the best computer science, to be able to just go build that. Right. But and now you're seeing SaaS services get into the space.
Yeah. And I think the key point here is learnability, right? Like, I mean, your son probably had to spend a bunch of time for that use case, right? Now imagine having a LLM actually just learn it, right? And go do it. And
go
do it for
that,
millions of people.
And just use type in a sentence that says, this is what I want to accomplish. And
eventually,
then the LLM just spits it out. And
or maybe it just copies it, what you do. Yeah. Like, I mean, that is very, very, I think, powerful. So we'll see. I mean, this is just, again, another week in AI, another week in AI.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like, so, but I think that's pretty cool. The second development, I think, was Grok. I mean, Elon Musk. So he released, so I don't know, like we haven't spoken about this, but I think, Elon Musk set up this big, massive data center with GPUs, basically GPU cluster in Memphis. And now I think they came online. I mean, the NVIDIA CEO was talking about how fast that cluster went live. Something that takes people like, I don't know, a year or more was done by Elon Musk in like 19 days or something. So some very crazy execution. But now the API was released in public beta, private beta, or whatever it was called. But I did sign up for it, so I have to play with it. And what is interesting about this one is that the data that it has access to. So right now, I'm sure all the Twitter data is probably what it's trained on, right? So what I'm sort of super interested in is, hey, I mean, Eric, you're a community guy and social. So what kind of social insights can I mine? What kind of trends can I find out? What can I find out about Eric? What did he tweet just yesterday? Right. Like, I mean, I'm interested in exploring, sort of the possibilities there and sort of bringing that in. Right. Like, I mean, there's again, I mean, I think a lot about signals and buying intent and, right. Like right. So there could be a gold mine here. Who knows?
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting that Elon is doing what Elon does. Lots of cool things very fast. Right. Like he somehow cuts through what it takes to actually do this. Now, he's also the richest man in the world. So if you want to throw some money at stuff, he can just unlimitedly throw whatever he wants at whatever he wants. And he doesn't have to worry about return. He doesn't have to worry about cash flow. He just goes and says, I want to do this. This is cool. And then he spends whatever he needs to spend to make whatever he needs to make.
I mean, I think credit to him for his ability to just have so much cachet with investors, right? Like, I mean, to be able to raise the money that he needs, right, for these things, right? Like, it's not coming out of his own pocket, right? But he is able to go convince a bunch of heavyweight investors to put in the money necessary to, So
we're going to start calling this the Elon Musk AI podcast, because every week this guy comes up in the news doing some other thing. But he is a big AI leader. I mean, he did invest in OpenAI.
OpenAI. He was one of the founders, actually, right? He was one of the founders. Yeah,
he's going to be a mover in this space, right? And he's going in his own direction, but he's going to do his thing. So he'll be a force.
Yes,
no question.
Absolutely.
I know there was a Wall Street Journal article that was interesting. I think there was more people that were talking about stuff. What else is in the news?
Yeah, so I think, I think the thread there, really, one of the threads, I think, is just pessimism around AI, right? Like, so there's AI pessimists, there's AI optimists. And so I think there was an article in the Wall Street Journal this week. And
I wouldn't call it pessimist. I think you're using the wrong word there. He wasn't pessimistic, right? It was just, you do not want to just have constant hype, right? You want to actually have rational conversation, right?
That's
so
true.
I felt that article was a little bit more rational.
Yeah. But I do think, again, I don't know what is the word for it, but there's optimists, and then there is the opposite of that, right? Or the other side of the spectrum. And maybe this Andy was not in that camp, but what I've noticed is that how you view this debate, or how your mental worldview, right, of what's going to happen in the next 5, 7, 10 years with AI, right, or how AI is going to transform things, definitely does have an impact on how you shape things, right? Like, I mean, as a product leader,
I'm going to call you out on that, because pessimist is the wrong word. So in medical research, I have a CRISPR lab, and I do gene editing on the side as a hobby, right?
Oh my God, you do!
Yeah, make my cat glow neon green, right? and there is in medical research, there's this funnel analysis, right? In order to determine a study bias, right? And study bias is in you look at a medical research and you'd say, okay, you should, in any kind of medical research, you should have some positive articles and you should have some negative articles, because in medicine we don't understand how it actually works, and you can hardly see what's going on, right? Let alone figure it all out. And so when you're looking at medical bias, you look at, like kind of the mean average of studies, and you should have some above the mean and you should have some below the mean. And that tells you that you don't have media bias, right? Or you don't have selective bias in your medical research. And I look at AI in the same manner, right? We should have some studies or some articles that are talking, above positive. We should have some that are talking negative. And then the culmination of that is knowledge, right? And where if you get media biased, everything's just rosy. Everybody's saying the rosy things, right? And nobody's pointing out problems. Nobody's pointing out challenges, right? And so then you get biased, which then means you're not being intelligent, right? So I would say that the Wall Street Journal article by I have his name
Andy
here.
Kessler.
Kessler was just one of the
a
ones
rational view. I mean,
yeah,
absolutely. I think I mean on his count, as far as that article is concerned,
and he brought up real issues that we'll talk about. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. The issue that he brought up about was the fact that is there going to be enough training data for LLMs in the next decade, for example, right? After 2030, for example. And I think he was specifically talking about human prose, written prose, right? Like, so, I mean.
And if you listen to this podcast, this is something to pay attention to, because this is actually really intelligent, right? So continue on. But I just want to call this out, that this is actually an aha moment for me when I started learning about this, right? So continue on.
Yes. I mean, I think this whole thing about model collapse has been brought up before, which is, hey, well, what happens when there isn't enough data for models to train on? Then the thing is about, hey, synthetic data. Let's use synthetic data, but synthetic data is also generated by AI. So then what's going to happen? Basically, the model will sort of collapse upon itself, and that's use the word inbreeding.
To up level that a little bit for layman's terms, because you're deep down in the weeds when it comes to AI and technology, and I'm just kind of like a marketing guy, and so I'll up level that and say that okay, what he's trying to say in this article is that right now, LLMs are harvesting human written information, right? Out on the web, right? When you run out of human information that you can't harvest anymore, what does that mean? Or is AI able to generate new information? And his argument is not really. Like when you look at what AI generates, it's all generate based on human brain activity that's writing it down, and then they harvest that. Now they as we talked about, they generate correlations and they bring new observations. The LLMs do that for you, but they're not making base new information. And so then if you then, and what you're saying is, if you then have the only way to get new base information is to start using AI to generate that, but yet they don't generate it. So now, you're kind of letting AI generate AI, and that's what he calls AI inbreeding, right? And his point is it's just going to become gibberish, right? And then eventually it's just going to be stupid, right? Because AI doesn't generate new thoughts.
Right. And, I think if we were to zoom out a little bit, I think even with past technologies, I mean, there's always been, we don't have full visibility, right? What's going to happen over the next few months and so on with new technologies, a couple of years, but really it's not entirely clear how we're going to, kind of solve certain challenges, right? And it seems like human ingeniousness and creativity, we always seem to, kind of come up with solutions. So I'm not, certainly I don't know what exactly is the answer here, but I think it is a good point. And
it resonated with me because I have not seen, I feel like the AI right now with LLMs is just a more efficient Google search engine, right? As we talked, Google collates all this information, but I got to go through pages and pages and pages, and it doesn't create any knowledge amongst all the things that it's collecting, where AI engines actually build correlations, right? And so, but are they generating? No, it's just a big search engine.
I mean, it is generating content from looking at those links. And Eric, I think the way I think about these things is that, or think about search engine, right? Like, is that it's one capability, right? Like, so Perplexity is a search engine, if you will, right? LLM enabled search engine. And that's one use case for using LLMs. Now, what we just spoke about a little bit earlier about Claude, right? Being able to do right? Robotic process automation kind of stuff, right?
Mhm.
Now that's a different capability, right? But
Right.
powered by the same foundational model. So
It's agents that are connected to the new search.
that's right.
The
That's
new-
right. Well,
right.
yeah,
I had to
yeah.
say that,
I
right?
mean, yeah.
Google never built agents to their search engine because their results are just here.
Right.
Where now you have intelligent correlations and you have actions based on that.
Actions, right?
Right.
Actions. So it's
Right.
able to
Actions.
act, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and could be on a very specific data
Right.
set, which is,
Right.
hey, I'm going to supply how I do things on my machine,
Right.
on my laptop, and you go replicate it. So I think that is the beauty here, right? That
Right.
that there's new things that it's able to
Yeah.
learn and do,
Right.
right? So the whole thing about generation and
Right.
next token prediction, etc., is
Right.
like
It's
who-
maybe
i-
just
i-
it's missing the point, which is you don't need you. There's plenty of humans that are generating the content, and the value of the AI is to be able to correlate it and then take action on it, right?
Right.
And drive
Right.
the car down the street and have a self-driving car, right? Or a
Right.
self anything. And then when we'll get into the next topic of services, right? It's about being able to then have these agents do services, and you have a smart enough engine
Right.
that can handle the services that you don't really maybe need
Right.
better
Right.
data. And maybe this is Andy Kessler's fault, is that he's a model builder, right? So he's
Right.
always looking for what's the next well, maybe there isn't, maybe it's good enough.
Right.
If you can drive the car down the street and navigate all the thing, how often do you need more data? Well, when the roads change, I guess. Or
Right.
and so he's like, well, but what are we doing for the next smarter, bigger,
Right.
smarter?
Right.
It's like, well, if you got enough intelligence to do all the major services you need to do,
Right.
then as long as you're incrementally absorbing more information as it's generated by humans, then maybe that's all you need.
Yeah. And I've been on this point. I know that a lot of the labeling, not a lot, but like there's these large labeling companies, right, who work with OpenAI, Cohere, Claude, etc. And my understanding is, I mean, they hire a ton of PhDs across the world, right? Like thousands of PhDs. So that just goes to, and what do these guys do? They are writing these specialized answers, right? If I ask something about like a black hole, or like mass spectroscopy and so on and so forth, the reason you're getting some of these great answers is because somebody's sitting down and written it down, and of course there's all labeling, right? Also, so this is all about human pros. I mean, to point about Andy's point, right? Like, so we'll have to see how exactly this is going to get, sort of. I mean, we're going to traverse it. It's going to be an interesting challenge for sure.
So if you're watching this live, we do live stream on YouTube, and we do also, if you're listening to this audio, we're on iTunes and we're also on Spotify. But if you happen to be looking at, I think the camera view is on YouTube, right? Do we publish?
This is on the camera
so
view is on
YouTube and on
yeah.
LinkedIn, right? So you can
Yes,
go follow us.
that's
And
correct.
and for those of you that are looking at my backdrop and wondering what books are in the background, I will say my favorite book is the Harry Potter series. So that's what you're looking at back here. So I've always looked at some of the live streamers and they have these books back here and you're like, what are they? Right? You're like, what are they? All right. So if you happen to look us up and you see what Rajesh and myself, Eric Nielsen, looks like, now I've given you some sample, some book information. So
there's some great
go,
books here
right,
in the behind me, which mindful
well,
is-
there's cooking books, and I think there's some
That's awesome.
some old IT books out there, the O'Reilly series books. I think if you tilt your head one way, you might see a pink O'Reilly book back there. There you go. Maybe not, but anyway. So transitioning from news now, right? Which I think there's been a lot of news out there. I think the Andy Kessler article that was in the Wall Street Journal was interesting. What Elon is doing is interesting, and his new data center and APIs. And then of course, when you look at what is it, Klarna? We're going to get into Klarna. Made some announcements too.
Klarna.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a slightly older. I mean, this happened a month or 2 months ago, right? Like, so Klarna did two things. So Klarna is a buy now, pay later company.
And we're going to transition to this topic of services. So I thought I would just mention them and go, okay.
I mean,
they're putting pressure on Salesforce.
I mean, so they were a Salesforce customer. Klarna was a Salesforce customer and a Workday customer. And the big news announcement when it happened like a couple of months ago was the fact that they were retiring Salesforce, and they actually built a CRM like ground up on their own, right? Using agents.
Using agents and AI.
Yeah, right? Using agents and AI, right? Like, so, and I believe they did the same with Workday, or they were going to retire Workday as well.
Right.
So
this transitions us into the topic of today, which is AI services, right?
Right.
And what's actually happening with AI services, as we touched last thing, what's the value proposition of those? And for them, they were like, the value proposition, we're going to replace all our tools. We're going to not spend money on Salesforce any longer. We're going to actually use AI to replace some of these, brownfield technologies we've had in place for the last 10 years. So it is interesting to watch what they're doing there.
Absolutely,
Right?
absolutely. I mean, some of these SaaS platforms, they suck a lot of money, right? Like from their customers. So your average Salesforce implementation at a say Series C, Series D company is probably like $500,000 to $1 million, right, every year.
Sure.
So
right.
there is decent money, right? Like I mean, it does show up on your costing. So
they do big enterprise deals. I know we're doing like a $8-10 million deal per year, right? Just to use those guys, right? And yeah, they're right for there's some big money there, right? Big target.
Exactly,
right,
exactly. So I think one big enterprise trend that we are going to see is just replacing like Salesforce and SAP, for example. If one were to kind of point out a couple of big players, right? I think, and so how is that going to kind of evolve, and what kind of players?
And there's going to be some innovator's dilemma here, right? Because I know AI is Salesforce is doing AI,
of course,
but again, so is Google. But that at the same time, if you look at their cash flow and where their cash flow is coming from, it's from things that AI might start to eat into.
Yeah, and I think I mean, Salesforce in earnest, I mean, is already at least their demos, right? They're great at doing demos, to sort of get their base excited. So clearly some demos around agents, it shows well, right, within their platform. Now how well it does, how quickly they roll it out, etc., I'm not sure. So but overall, I think, what Klarna, sort of a canary in the coal mine, so to speak, is that, hey, Klarna did this. Now question is, if other people start doing this and it gains momentum, that's an issue for some of these larger players. And the question of value and ROI, right? Like I think I think is totally relevant, right? Is AI delivering value? I think definitely, if you look at it from a retail consumer standpoint, probably the answer is like a fairly resounding yes. I mean, OpenAI has millions and millions of subscribers paying now $20 a month. I forget the number, right? So you're seeing some real traction, I guess, right? Already.
I don't know if I'm sold on that. Like, I mean, it is a fun parlor trick, right? It's a fun, like, so why do I pay $20 a month for this? Well, I signed up because, I like being able to say, oh, give me some code, right? And go find me some code on XYZ, right? And I'll use the API a little bit, but have I actually, am I in the AI, we talked always investigating mode? Yeah, I am, right? Like I haven't identified and operationalized the value prop. And that's what we're really talking about today is like, what is the ways to target moving from always investigating to, hey, as we look at services, right? How to identify what's the value prop for those services? So let's take my favorite one, which is call center deflection. Right. Like it's an easy one, right? I have X number of help center agents that are sitting, taking calls all day long. And, at VMware, we have people calling in, answering questions, asking questions. And how do I deflect that? Well, I use community to deflect that, but now AI starts, being a very real potential for call deflection. So when you're trying to figure out how much am I going to save here, right? What's the real ROI on that? The first thing you have to do is identify the costs, right? Like if you're trying to solve and you don't want to just always investigating, but you want to build a program and roll it out and have ROI, right? First thing is identify your costs. What costs are you trying to avoid? Right. I pay somebody $45 an hour because VMware's barely technical. We have to have smart people on the call, right? So $45 an hour. How much does the average call cost, right? The average call costs, an hour, right? So, okay, that's $45, but actually the call takes all day, right? A lot of these calls come in, they're complicated. And so a call center engineer will work on a call for 4 to 5, 6 hours.
Wow.
So the average cost per call is like $800, right? And so you're like, okay, how many calls do we have? How many agents do we have? How many calls do we have? And then what can we do? So in the community side, we calculated out that if we had, 20% of the calls deflected by the community platform, then we would be saving, around $3 or $4 million a year, right? And so, okay, we pay for the community platform $500,000 and we set it up and we operate it. It costs another $500,000 to operate, but then we're only $1 million in and we're saving $3 to $4 or $5 million on call deflection. Right. Now you look at AI and you go, okay, this is the cost, right, that we're experiencing. If we purchase this tool or we build the model, what SaaS tool do we have to purchase, right? That will do this in the second phase of everybody making services with actions, right? How much does it cost to implement said? How much data storage do we need for the models? Is the model on-prem or local? Do we have to have internal servers? What's the cost of the implementation? Then there's also the timing of the implementation. How long will it take? If it takes you over a year to implement said model, right? Does our technology change so fast that it's never going to be caught up with our current version of our software? So great, we train a model, it knows all the answers, it can deflect these calls, but it's like it's out of date, right? So there is time value of getting to the market, but then also the service. How quickly does the service solve the problem, right? Like if it can solve the problem quicker for the end customer, the end customer is losing $500,000 every hour that they've got problems, right? And so there's an equation of
just deriving value. What's the math behind this, right? Like I think I mean the example you gave, if there's a call that's like 6 hours 6 hours long, I mean this is massive, right? Maybe AI today could handle the first, God knows. I mean, I'm just
AI is smart.
Terms, right?
AI is
like
smart.
the first 3 hours of it, maybe who knows? The first half of the call is all knowledge-based sort of derived information, right? And then the second half, right, like is where you might need help. And honestly, I mean, you're asking about the subscription, like PipeIQ. The reason I use ChatGPT subscription is the data is private, right? It's not used for training. That's what they say, right? So I can ask questions in a free fashion about whatever it is that I need to know. If I need to know the TAM of a certain thing or upload my meeting recording and so on and so forth, I can do it with knowing that the data is not just going to go into the LLM, right? So, but what I wanted to say is that from a value a standpoint, if we take the data coming in, there are ways to, I think, understand how to look through, just with the example of call deflection. There is, I think people are now, I mean, I think there is the degree of confidence with these models is such that I think we are moving towards a outcome-based model, service model, right? Like, hey, if I resolve this particular, query, you pay me X dollars, right? Now that's a completely new level of confidence, if you will. I don't know about confidence, but that's just a change in pricing model, which folks like Salesforce may be forced to take on, because potentially others might come up with the same sort of model, right? So I mean, something to think about there. But you I think you're just bringing up the overall point, which is how do we think through, right, the sort of the value equation.
Well, and we've we're also, I need to call out workflow changes, right? So because there is time value money, how long will it take me to implement this, right? Then there's workflow changes, right? Like can my new process, right, how do I engage my customer with this new workflow, right? Like the customer is used to calling 1-800 number, supportme.com or whatever our support number is. And then they'll get in and they'll talk to an agent, and then the agent will start a ticket with them and so forth and so on. The workflow changes when you have to put AI in. So then what's the cost of that workflow change, right? What's the cost of training the people that are currently doing the process to introduce this new process, right? Or training your customer. What's the cost of actually describing to customer, there's a new way to get these answers, right? Or delivery of that AI model to the customer, right? There's got to be some changes, right? Like we're going to build a website. We're going to drive people to that website. Those are all these things. It's almost like for a cost of a service, you actually have to have a template that goes through each one of these. What's the value prop? How much is it costing you today? What's the timeline? What's the cost of the workflow that exists? How would we replace that workflow? And all that then is required for every one of these service implementations, right?
I agree. What is ironic is that there's probably going to be AI transformation is going to probably be a practice that some of these larger consulting firms are going to have, the big five and the BCGs and McKinseys probably,
Right.
But what I'm told,
Yeah,
or
I can
my
see
understanding-
that.
Yeah,
I can
right.
see
You
they're
can
going
see
to come
that,
in
right?
because not only that, but you have organizational resistance, right?
Yeah.
Because people are making their
Oh,
living at the
that's true.
current process, and as we know, change
Yeah.
adoption is, they got McKinsey whole programs around change acceleration, right? And this
Yes.
is going to be a change acceleration exercise as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, I was talking to a prospect recently about where the person was saying, hey, if AI is being shoved down my throat, right, I don't have a choice. I'll take it, right? Like, because the
Right.
person was making a statement about how they didn't really want to implement a AI centric solution, but hey, I'm being forced to by my bosses,
Right.
and I don't have a choice, kind of thing.
But
So
this is where you got to be careful, because you don't want to be the guy everybody jumps, the stupid people, right? Like where you just do it because everybody else is doing it, right?
Right.
You fall a lemming following
Right.
everybody off the edge of the cliff, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
being able to actually articulate value prop gets you out of the
Yes, that's true.
always investigating mode, right?
That's true.
Because otherwise you just
Yeah.
you don't have those numbers. Now, I think all this is real. And then the other piece that we talked about is Klarna. How do you say that?
Klarna. Right.
We talked about Klarna, and there is then also the cost of tool replacement, right? So if you have a $10 million tool that you're paying for per year, if it's Salesforce, and you can use that $10 million savings to, create an entire new workflow, right? Then, it might be worth that project.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, I think there's a lot of complexity with this, right? We don't want to minimize it. It's just that if any tool that's integrated into your workflow in a deep fashion, it's very hard to replace or pull it out, right? Like, I mean, that's what, I mean, a lot of these companies survive on. So, so it's not easy. And then, as you said, there's other costs around just the transformation itself, work, training, etc. So, I mean, just if you were to double click on the call deflection, customer support use case, right? I mean, I think existing platforms, for example, or chatbots, right? Like, there is the thing about, hey, I'll let the machine do the initial triaging, which is even now the case, right? And then it'll go to a human. I think there is, in this particular example, there isn't as much of a change, because the machine now is just you're changing the underlying engine, literally, right? Like, it is still doing the triaging, and it'll probably do it smarter, faster, better for a longer time. So only fewer calls will go to a human, or the point at which it goes to a human. So maybe, in this case, the amount of change needed is lower, right? May not be the case with all workflows, right?
Sure.
Certainly not, but
I think call deflection is always an easy one, because everybody
Yes.
can understand that, and
Yeah.
okay, great, another call deflection one. I kind of look at it, and I like sales acceleration. I think I mentioned this the other day in the previous podcast. It's like, we call deflected, we say $5 million, but when we looked at sales acceleration, right? We were affecting $7 billion in revenue, right? Because the new process and the community engagement that it goes on with sales acceleration is very, very real. And if you mess that up, you could impact $7 million worth of deals, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think John Ferrier, I was watching his podcast earlier today, and he was talking about, I don't know what word he used, but like revenue. I mean, revenue, not acceleration, but something around revenue, right? Like, so definitely, I mean, with AI, I think revenue area is the one that's going to be attacked the most, right? Like, or how are we going to sort of improve our revenues using AI? Right?
And there's a little bit of the Andy Kessler kind of limitation of, there's only so many people that want your product. So an AI can accelerate your revenue, but you have diminishing returns, because
everybody's using it.
Everybody has TAM, right? Total addressable market. And then that'll be that. Now it could change how much money you're spending. So again, it's an ROI thing, right?
Yes.
Maybe it costs me $3 million to have a sales team that's going to get at my TAM, and AI isn't going to increase your TAM, right? It's not going to increase customers using your product. There's a total addressable market. It can change the percentage of TAM you capture, right? At a given cost, right? But
I'd argue there, Eric, like imagine a situation where the AI is able to throw new ideas at you, right? Of what adjacent markets you can go after. So, right, like that's almost like a product ideation co-pilot, right, if you will.
Bullshit. I'm not certain that's the way it's going to go, right? Like yeah, sure, you can say that. That's a magic. Oh, look, it'll figure out another market for.
I mean,
our products,
that's so there's going to be co-pilots for every role, and
right.
Is a product manager going to have a co-pilot? Obviously, yes.
Will
probably,
it accelerate?
Yeah.
Will it increase your TAM, and will it find a new TAM avenue for you? Possibly. But I think the bigger thing is that it will lower the cost to get at and increase what percentage you get of your TAM.
Right.
However, this is also important. Your competitor, you always have competitors that are trying to get after
They're also
TAM.
going to use AI.
They're also going to use AI.
I mean,
and it becomes
this
like
is race to the bottom.
Race to the bottom, or just race to evenness, right? Right.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, if the AI is better than a human, and you don't adopt it and your competitor does, then you got a disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's
a
war.
I think it is a war, and we are seeing that in the foundational model, layer, right? Like I think ChatGPT has dropped its prices by 98% over the last year for 4, I think, the 4 model, and I think 4.0 probably, and Mark Andreessen, I think, had a debate on Twitter probably like about how he's this commoditization in
of
the foundational
AI,
AI in the foundational model layer, right? It's very clear, right? Which is good for app developers like us, and it's good for the world as a whole, right? Like because now there's just like more technology that can be developed. So it's all good, but yes, what happens in a world where everybody's using AI, right?
And I don't want everybody running GPUs consuming massive amounts of power. We should settle on a couple LLMs that are going to be the ones that we use by paying for APIs into that model.
Right. And then there's a small language models, right? Like lower consumption and so on and so forth. That's another topic.
Out on the edge and so forth. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, I think coming back to the value, right? How do you compute the value? I think, yes, moving from always investigating to actually, clear articulated ROI, I think is important. And I don't know. I mean, it doesn't necessarily, it depends on the size of the company, right? And we have been having some conversations even internally about, hey, if you're going after, companies that have certain size of SDR teams or sales teams, right? Then you look at the current existing conversion rates they have, and then you say, hey, use PipeIQ, and then there's a lift, right? Like, so then it's a very clear ROI articulation, right? Versus, let's say your founder-led sales pretty early, right? You don't necessarily have a ton of infrastructure or data to go by. Now, what happens there, right? How do you demonstrate, right, efficacy or value, right? Like, so there are, even in that case, there is, but maybe more outcome based and so on. But certainly, I think every business is probably asking for that, sort of understanding that, right? Like, I mean, in general, you always have the ROI hat on whenever there is a spending need. So,
and for me, there's also just this notion of, organizational resistance, right? And, how much is it going to cost to implement new things, and how do they get started? Because for me, it's always been especially in social selling. Social selling's always been effective, right? It's not AI, but it was a new way of harnessing the signals, right? The market signals, and then optimizing your sales team to be able to go after that. But yet it was, sales people weren't willing to adopt it, right? Sales, even though it was more effective, they have what they have. They have their account list. They have the Rolodex. They give them calls. They take them golfing. And so even though it would have been more effective, it's like one of these things that you have to get over the organizational resistance or human resource,
or
change.
workflow resistance, workflow change, literally, right? Like, I mean, I think it would be safe probably to say that any social signals that are coming in today are all probably going into Salesforce, right? Like in the window, right? Within your lead or contact or account view, you are basically looking at some of the data that's coming in, right? Like, so literally, yeah, I think there's definitely a workflow aspect. I mean, you know,
and I think all the services have to deal with this, right?
Absolutely.
Like all the SaaS services are going to have to solve for this, right?
Yes.
Because, you know, you always take technologists and they're working on technology, right? And they don't really look at like, okay, how are we going to overcome that, you know, organizational resistance, right? On any new technology.
Right.
And I feel like the winners are the ones that actually have unique ways to overcome that. Right?
Yes.
Right? So it's less about how good their technology is and more. And Microsoft did this. This is how Microsoft became big in the 80s and 90s. They learned that they would just go into an enterprise CIO, right? You know, and take them to, you know, Monterey Club golf course. What's the one down there? Pebble Beach, right? And take them out for the weekend, right? And the next thing you know, they had to overcome all organizational resistance to Windows NT, right? You know, and Sun Microsystems went right out of business because they figured out how to overcome organizational resistance, right? And the companies that do that well will actually excel. And I look at Hootsuite and some of these guys that, you know, they just gave away their stuff, right? YouTube, you know, YouTube became big because they stole a bunch of videos, all the movies, and put them up online. For like 2 years, you could get stolen everything. Then Google bought it and they kept it up, right? And then eventually they got into the market, they overcome the market, and then they pull down all the illegal content, right? You know, so the innovators that innovate organizational resistance or product adoption are the ones that are going to do well in this. And, you know, and come back to Workday for a second. Klarna.
Right.
They're going to replace Workday as well. Like Workday does all kinds of things, right?
I believe they
were.
Yeah.
Like organizations that are willing to just throw out the whole process, right?
I mean,
we're going to just do this. Right?
We haven't seen too many examples like that yet, right? But
that's a way to overcome, right? That resistance.
I mean, you know, it also begs the question: do you have the talent in house, right, to be able to pull off something like this, right? Or are there going to be agencies that are going to spring up, or consulting firms, right? Like is a McKinsey with a specialized, more AI centric firm going to come in and say, hey, yeah, we can help you do this, right? Get off this, and you know,
the company I work for, I won't mention the name because I don't want to get in trouble, but they actually are their IT organization is bonused based on how quickly they can change, right? So they actually bonus their IT people on, you know, how many platforms can we consolidate, how many, you know, things can we turn off, how many replacements we can get that save money, right? And that's, to some degree, AI is going to save money. That's the point of it. So if you've bonused your organization to, you know, to hit those targets of adopting new technology to save money, that's a way to do it.
Right. I think, I mean, that kind of goes into incentive and incentive alignment. Yeah. I guess that would be the true of when it went from on-prem to cloud, I suppose, or like, things like that. I don't know. I mean, if you were to kind of look at
and it might cycles, be that might be what drives this cycle. There's the value prop to the customer,
right?
But then there's also cost savings. Right?
Yes.
So a lot of times, you know, enterprises really focus on the cost savings, right? And the value to customers is kind of like, well, that's nice. You know, like we have our TAM, we have ways to sell to them. But if we could save, you know, $10 million by throwing away Salesforce or throwing away other and adopting an AI that's half price or doesn't have as many humans involved with it, that gets everybody's attention.
And I think that's one of the value
CFOs derived strategy when it comes to this stuff.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, if the cost saving makes a significant difference to your bottom line, I mean, absolutely. So, and I think that's a value prop, right, Eric? I mean, just like, I mean, cost savings is a value prop, revenue driver is a value prop, right? Like, but these are all you know, kind of useful things.
We kind of brushed over the LLM costs, right? Like, because that's one of the things that I'm a little bit worried about is like how many GPUs can NVIDIA kind of make, and how much nuclear power do we need to run this, and would we see consolidation in these LLMs? And like, you know, the industry is LLM crazy right now, right? And everybody is vying for their own. That you got on-prem LLMs because, you know, it's confidential data, but like, I gotta say that maybe this is just the way of the future, right? Like you're just going to have a lot of IT burning GPU resources in order to build better models for your business, right? And I think that's probably true, right? I don't think there's a way around that. I don't know. Yes, you have the big you know, hyperscalers like Azure and whatever will have
Yes,
their
exactly.
own, co-pilots and things. But then I don't know, maybe it's just like everybody has to have a web page. When web took over in 1995, right? Like all of a sudden everybody had to figure out what web technology was and what Apache was and spin this stuff up. And now it's a critical way to do business. And maybe that's just the way LLMs are going to be. And there's just going to be a cost structure around that. What are you thinking?
I mean, the way I think about this is that I don't think there's going to be like, what should I say? Like bunch of people trying different things, and therefore we're going to have, more GPUs being used or power consumption. I don't think that's how it's going to be. Like, I hear that Microsoft is building a new, nuclear reactor, right? Like it's right. So, and it's going to produce like gigawatts of power, for example. So now, a hyperscaler like Azure or Google is going to give you the sort of foundation, so to speak, right? Like the building blocks for you to go and build.
I get the hyperscalers, but what I was really looking for is this level, this next tier 2. We're calling it, the next act, right? Where there's all these services out there. Does that mean that all the services have to have LLMs? That and then if I'm running a service to my customer base, do I need LLM for that? Custom like LLM on-prem, and
when you think of a service, let's say are you thinking about
call deflection? Let's go back to our favorite, right? Like, okay, I'm deflecting. I gotta have a database. I have to have an knowledge that will then answer the questions that people are having with
That's right.
virtualization or whatever it is.
That's right. So I think that's in my opinion, that would be in the call deflection application or product would be in the application layer, basically, right? And then, I mean, you have RAG and like vectorization and so on that'll help you crunch through all of these data, etc.
Well, that's all I'm saying is that for our instance of call deflection, we're going to have a big LLM that has all our product knowledge,
thinking through
up
that
to date, right? And then that means that anybody else that wants to use it for call deflection is going to have their LLM, and like it's kind of like an Apache server. Everybody's going to have one. You're going to have a web team, and you're going to have to be optimizing.
Well, you could run that on. You could run that on Azure, right? Like in your own, right? Again, with some privacy guarantees, etc.
Right. But you're still going to have to grind through it, whether the CPU's over in their server in Seattle or in my data center in San Jose. It's still got to be a GPU doing it.
True.
Right.
And I mean,
that's cost structure. We're talking this podcast is cost structure. So I'm just wondering, is there any way to optimize that cost structure, or is everybody just going to have to pay this because that's what you need? And if I talk up, to you about PipeIQ, you're going to have to be smart enough about my products to do product, sales acceleration, which means you're going to have to learn about my product, have an LLM that knows about my product to be able to then formulate the actions required to engage with my customers and get me more sales. Right?
Absolutely.
Which means I'm going to have GPUs cranking on this.
I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, there's the bunch of costs, right? Like waterfall. Even I think about delivering even a single piece of value to the customer. There's a
No, I have to pay a salesman commission. There's a lot of money in sales, right? So as we talk, like whatever it is, $10 trillion or something.
I mean, that's a total services market, right? Like I think one of the big industries that are potentially going to get disrupted is the services industry itself, like all the consulting firms and so on and so forth, right? So, but no, I mean, there are real costs involved in all of this, and with the GPU, I think larger firms, larger enterprises definitely have to think about that because they have to bear the cost of it. While if you're a tier 2, a mid-market player, right, like a lot of this is going to be kind of given to somebody else to manage, basically, and you're going to run your application on some sort of a lightweight sort of interface.
No, I think that the winners for a lot of these services are going to be entry level, get started kind of programs, right? That you can come in. I look at Hootsuite and I go, we use Hootsuite for at VMware for like 4 years. It was the free version, right? And we could come in, get set up. I didn't have to get a PO and get everything going and have an ROI. And then as I started to use it, then it became something that I was like, oh, this is actually, saving me money. It's doing the service it wants to. And then they upselled me, right? And pretty soon we're spending $50,000 a year, on their, enterprise class, and then pretty soon it was $80,000 a year, right? And that I think getting adoption of some of these AI services in the service market is probably a way a lot of people, like Reddit did that, right? Reddit just showed up, and the next thing you know, people are using it. You didn't charge any money for forum posts. You could just post all day, and now they're IPOing, and they're going to make $40 billion IPO, right? Because they got everybody hooked on what was an expensive form solution if you had to do it in house, but if you used them,
Right.
they had a free version, and then they started upselling us into landing pages and all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of these guys are going to maybe go that way.
Yeah, so I think distribution is going to be a very interesting question, right? So like people like Hootsuite, I don't know about Hootsuite, but
Yeah.
things like Miro or Slack, right, have
Slack,
been,
same thing.
yeah,
Right.
like virality has been
Right.
a big, like embedded virality in your product has been a huge help for
Yeah.
folks like Dropbox,
Right,
Box,
right.
and things
Mhm.
like that, right? We don't know what's the unlock for Gen AI. I mean, if you're an application, right?
Right.
I mean, all kinds of applications are going to be built on top of LLMs, right?
Right.
But the whole question of distribution is always top of mind for an investor, for example, right? Like, okay, how are you going to get this in the hands of customers, and how are you going to grow the customer base?
So you mentioned Slack. Do you know what the upsell model for Slack is?
I do actually. I happen to, because I happen to be one of the victims
you
of
happen
that.
to be a victim of that. Right.
I
It's
think
like
it was 3 months. Or
3 months of data they
yeah,
save, and then
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it. So all your Slack chats and everything
You
go
don't want
away
to
after
lose it.
3 months. So you're like, oh, that's like a repository. We really want to have that for more than 3 months. So then they upsell you.
Yeah, no, the Slack is an amazing product.
Right,
Honestly,
sure.
I don't mind paying the money for it. I mean, there are some products which you feel like, hey, outstanding value, right? Like
Right.
it's totally okay. I mean, ChatGPT $20 subscription is one of those currently, at least for
Right.
me, right? And so is Slack, actually, right? Like outstanding value from an org standpoint of what it can do for you. So. But yeah, any case, I mean, in terms of, I think, distribution, that's more of an app layer question, right? But the value prop always, of course, as an application, totally. I think for an application, maybe value prop is more clearer articulation, which is, hey, what kind of workflow problem am I solving? What kind of pain am I solving, right? I think the customer is not worried whether you're using Gen AI or blah, 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 right? Like, doesn't matter to a customer. It's like, what is the pain that you're solving, and how effectively are you solving it? That's the question that you always have to answer, right? Which was true 20 years ago, is true today, right? But just what's available to you now is the Gen AI or AI kind of pieces that you have, and therefore you can solve new kinds of problems. Number one. Number two, by solving, the whole workflow is going to change or even disappear, for that matter, right? So that's where I think, as an app layer person, you got to be focusing your energy on.
Well, and I know I tend to get myself in trouble when I do podcasts, because this is what I do, right? So as we move forward, I'm looking forward to PipeIQ Now, right? Where, same kind of thing. I can come in, I get PipeIQ, I get the PipeIQ Now button, and I can start using it to accelerate sales right away, right? So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. We hope to have some sort of a self-serve PLG kind of model, right, where we can give it to users. In
same
some
kind
ways,
of thing. I think you got to race to the adoption mode, right? Everybody that needs to get that. And I know you guys focus on, bigger commercial accounts as well, and how to optimize enterprise sales. But then I always look at the, social selling model, where, Social Studio from Salesforce, and they all had entry-level things that could get people into what's actually happening there, right? So I think all the AIs are going to have to do that, and to some degree I think ChatGPT did that, right? Like, I mean, there's a free
even now there is a free version,
right?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's massive. I mean, with the kind of money they've raised, and I mean, absolutely, that's a no-brainer. But I think, to be fair, I mean, there's no friction, right? I mean, whenever you do a PLG sort of motion, the key is to have as little friction as possible. So you got to figure out what is that, right? Like path, right, within your product or your user journey, that can help user get value, right, with very little.
But at the same time, you can't put yourself out of business, right?
Exactly.
You can't sell everything for we're losing money on every transaction. We're going to make it up on volume. That's the classic sales phrase. Everybody says, yeah, we're losing money on every one, but we're going to make it up on volume. Right? Well, no, you're not. Like, and it gets back to, AI, right? Always investigating, right? And even the vendors, right, are always investigating, right? Like, what is the model? What is sales? And then how are you dropping your prices? And where, and then there's greenfield, and make plays to be first mover in a field, and how much money. And look at Amazon, right? They spent 15 years not making any money, right? Until they stumbled across AWS, and all of a sudden they were able to make money on their servers. I don't think they ever made any money selling books, right? Like truth be told, right? So you don't know where any of this is going.
You don't know. I mean, it's still very early, right? Like, I mean, we are only 2 years in from ChatGPT. So in the longer arc of the tech wave we are in, it's probably still pretty early. So a lot of the questions are still not figured out. I mean, and case in point on this, Ashu Garg from Foundation Capital, he put out a post just, I think, yesterday, where he questioned what is the wisdom of investing in OpenAI at the valuation that they were able to raise at $6 billion, raising $6 billion at $157 billion valuation. And he was, the post alluded to, the question of, hey, are the most valuable AI companies, have they been built yet? And it is not, was his point.
Yeah,
right? Like,
I think every booming industry has a pets.com moment, right? Where they get ahead of their skis and everything gets very big and the valuation and then all of a sudden pets.com and then grocery, what was it? Not pets.com, but the grocery one, Webvan, right? Yeah. Everybody gets ahead, and then they realize, no, the grocery stores are super optimized for the last mile delivery of perishable goods. And so all of a sudden Webvan, but then it caught itself back up. Everybody got it, and now web is just a function of how you do business, right?
Right.
And so I think we'll see some of that.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, is OpenAI the Yahoo or Alta Vista of 2000s, or is it the Google?
Right. Well, yes, that's right. And the big tech companies have enough money that they're not gonna be Alta Vista, right? Because Alta Vista didn't have billions of dollars per quarter they could throw at it, right? So, but it is true that the technology innovators might not capitalize on it.
I mean, the compute costs are crazy, right? They're gonna lose whatever 44 billion by 2026 or 29, something like that. So the costs are also proportionally higher.
All right. Well, we've been going for 55 minutes. We only got 4 minutes left here. So actually 56 minutes. So Aldo, they got the classic question. What was the most exciting thing that you felt happened this week? And, we touched a little bit about it, but you got to pick one.
I think the RPA thing from Claude is definitely interesting, right? Though it's not as sort of easily accessible as Notebook LM, right? Like the whole Notebook LM thing was pretty cool, actually, right? But yeah, I mean, this is definitely a leg up in terms of capabilities. Just a glimpse into what might be, coming up ahead for us here. Controlling, I mean, could open up a bunch of it could open up new industries entirely, actually, for all you know.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah. For me, mine in my mind for the week is still AI inbreeding. I just think that's fascinating that, like the models will top out at some point, right? Because the models still require human research, learning how to gene edit, right? Like I don't see an AI figuring out the next gene edit protocol, right? Like it might be able to point us in the right direction. It might augment it, right? But in the end, there are still a lot of scientists that are doing a lot of research on what's actually happening. Quantum physics, the AI might figure some of that out, but I doubt it, right? So like for me, the models are going to top out, and understanding how to articulate that to people, right? Because I've always felt that, but I didn't have a good vocabulary to explain why I don't think AI is, going to be smarter than us. I think it's based on us, right?
I mean, it is based on us, but I think computers
now they can be dangerous, and if you have agents that can shoot bullets, they could all kill us, right? I'm not saying that the Terminator thing won't be a thing to consider, but I'm not sure that AI, like for me, AI inbreeding was something that I'm like, okay, I can articulate why I think the models will top out, and it'll wait for humans to progress the knowledge, and then it'll use it. Right. It'll use everything.
I think historically technology has always been an aid, right? Like even since the Stone Ages, when somebody made a sharp object out of stone.
Right.
I think even today, right? Like a computer has been an aid, a cell phone has been an aid, and so will AI, right? Like in whatever shape or form, right? It's going to be your accessory to do better creative work as a human being. I mean, I think that's how I think
Yeah, if nothing else, it gives us a lot to talk about every week because
Yes, for sure.
it is booming, and I don't have to work so hard writing code anymore, right? So that's good. So there's a lot of positive things that are coming out of this deal, right? So I like it, and if they can get me help quicker, cheaper, without having to pay a support contract for my next enterprise software, that's also good. So looking forward to all the results that come out of that.
Absolutely.
Well,
Cool.
all right. Well,
Awesome.
it's the end of the Sunday. I call it the AI church session is coming to a close. Feel free to throw a quarter in the plate if you want to. Like we don't have a how to buy us coffee kind of setup, but if you see us out and about, you can always just buy me a coffee. That's good. Give us a like and a subscribe. We are on iTunes and we are on Spotify. So you can go subscribe to us there. We're putting out episodes, once a week. I call it the AI church session on Sunday. Sometimes it's Monday, but every week we kind of look at what's happening throughout the week and then what do we think is coming next week. So excited about that. And as always, Rajesh, good to hang out with you.
Hey, same here, Eric. It's always a joy to talk about AI and with you on this topic.
See you guys next week.
All right. Bye-bye.